as you heard, I write about religion. And when I began, I really had never associated a religion with compassion. I'd had a rather difficult youth, and yet in every subject to which I turned my mind, whether I was talking about a history of God or a history of Jerusalem, or a history of fundamentalism even, the material kept bringing me back to compassion. And I now am absolutely convinced that the compassion is not just a nice idea. It's an urgent global imperative. It's essential for our survival. As His Holiness has just reminded us, we live in a deeply interconnected world in which what happens today in Afghanistan can have repercussions tomorrow in New York or London. We're connected economically, financially, electronically, and yet we still tend to think of ourselves in a special, privileged position. Whereas the Golden Rule, which has been developed in every single major world faiths independently, and said that it is the basis, the test of true spirituality, asks us to dethrone ourselves from the center of that world, of our world. Never treat others as you would not like to be treated yourself. That's Confucius's method. Look into your own heart, discover what gives you pain, and then refuse under any circumstance whatsoever to inflict that pain on anybody else. Now, if we had implemented this globally before, if we had treated other peoples as we would wish to be treated ourselves, we wouldn't be having so many problems today. And so we can no longer pursue self-interested, myopically nationalistic policies, because we are now one people. We stand and fall together. So the charter was written by several 20 leading activists representing 6 of the major world religions. And it was a demonstration that at a time when the religions are often seen to be at loggerheads, this we were all in agreement. But it is essentially a call to action. And one of the things we're doing with the Charter now is creating a more global structure, because it's active in Indonesia, Bali, Pakistan, and the Netherlands, London, and the United States, obviously, and we should all be in constant contact and working together for a better world. And you heard I wrote a book called 12 Steps to a Compassionate Life. And the title obviously calls to mind Alcoholics Anonymous. And that was quite deliberate because we are addicted to our pet hates. We don't know what we'd do without them. We're dependent upon them for our sense of self. And we feel personally threatened if these are attacked in any way. And yet, this is not just a religious understanding. Step 7 says how little we know. Because we are living in a very omniscient culture. You turn on the radio, and our airwaves are clogged with phone-ins, chat shows, people holding forth about this and that. And if you happen to know something about the subject under discussion, it's immediately clear sometimes that what the amount of reliable information that's being imparted could be comfortably contained on the back of a small postcard. And last night, for example, I was at an event at the British Museum, and quite a learned gentleman said to me, "Well, Islam's in a mess, isn't it?" Well, now, I tried to respond in a compassionate way. But the point is how little we know. And we're encouraged in our soundbite culture to think we've got it all, when the huge complexity of what we are dealing with escapes us. And in our discourse, we are remarkably uncompassionate. It's not enough for us in our political discourse, our media discourse, our academic discourse even, to seek the truth. We also have somehow to defeat and humiliate our opponents. But this was not, and there's a sort of omniscience in what we say. No one ever says, I don't know. And yet we are confronted now with a world situation with environmental problems that we don't know how to solve. The Taoists have a saying called the art of forgetting, where you perhaps have to forget some of your received wisdom and put yourself into a position where you're open to change. Socrates, founder of the Western rational tradition, said that we must stringently examine every single one of our received ideas. When people came to talk to Socrates, they thought they knew what they were talking about. But after half an hour with Socrates, relentless questioning, they realized they didn't know the first thing about such essential matters as courage or goodness or justice. And the Socratic dialogue, as reported by Plato, always ends with the participants bewildered, saying they really don't know anything at all. One says, we've got to go back to school and start again. And at that moment, Socrates says, you've become a philosopher because you realize how little you know. On the last day of his life, Plato said, Socrates said that he was wise only in one respect, that he knew nothing at all. And yet look how omniscient we are, even in our conversation about one another. Oh, well, the trouble with her is. As though you could sum up the huge, complex mystery of a human being in a single sentence. And we do it with whole cultures. Well, Islam's in a mess, isn't it? So I think to start the day with a sort of clean slate, so you say how little you know, is a very good and important beginning. There's a passage in Hamlet which has always spoken graphically to me. Hamlet, as you know, is causing a great deal of trouble in the court of Denmark, and the king has set two of his old friends to spy on him, Rosencrantz and Guildenstern. And it doesn't take Hamlet long to discover what's going on. And so one night he comes to Guildenstern with a pipe, a recorder, and he says, I pray you, play upon this pipe. My lord, I cannot, says Guildenstern. Why not, says Hamlet, it's as easy as lying. And then he says, well, there's nothing to it. You just blow down this tube, wiggle your fingers around, and out comes the music. And he goes on bullying him. And Guildenstern said, my lord, I have not the skill. Why look you now, says Hamlet. What a poor thing you would make of me. You would pull out all my stops. You would play me to the top of my bent. You would pluck out the heart of my mystery. And how often we do that with one another, with whole cultures, to pluck out the heart of that essential mystery of each human being, that essential genius in each of the great world cultures, simply to fulfill either a political, an economic, or even a personal agenda of our own. So the great Sufi philosopher Ibn Arabi says that every single one of us is a unique and unrepeatable incarnation of one of God's hidden names. And it doesn't matter what religion you are, because Sufis, Ibn Arabi writes poems to say he's at home equally in a synagogue, a mosque, a temple, or a church, because once you're glimpse the immensity of what we call the divine, all those man-made distinctions of us and them fall apart. But he said that every single one of us is that unique and unrepeatable revelation of God to the world. Everyone, and we can deface that in ourselves, but if we do, the world will be deprived of an essential revelation about the immensity of God. Now, if we think of all of us in this room, and it shows how impossible it is to sum up God. Religion is at its best, in my view, when it asks questions and leaves you in an attitude of wonder, and it's at its worst when it seeks to answer those questions in a definitive way. And we are all the same. No good just blaming religion, because we do it all the time in all our different walks of life. And Ibn Arabi said our job when in our interaction with other people is to recognize that spark of genius. And we have to do it with other cultures. And he talks, there's one, I found this passage very early in my studies, when I still thought that religion was all dogmatic and we are the best and we're the only. And then I came across this. It's Ibn Arabi. Do not praise your own faith so exclusively that you disbelieve all the rest. If you do this, you will miss much good. Nay, you'll fail to recognize the real truth of the matter. God, the omnipresent and omniscient, cannot be confined to any one creed. For he says in the Quran, wheresoever ye turn, there is the face of Allah. Everybody praises what he knows. His God is his own creature, and in praising it, he praises himself, which he wouldn't, and consequently, he blames the beliefs of others, which he would not do if he were just. But his dislike is based on ignorance. Now that is Islam. And so that's the sort of thing we have to bear in mind when we listen to the news. And we also have to recognize that if there are terrible goings on in some parts of, say, of the world, that is not because people are driven to it by some irrational religious force, but because of awful things that have happened in their country, in their societies, in which, and I speak here as a British person with an English accent, we're implicated in that, we colonialists. We helped to create this catastrophe. Had we treated our colonists with the golden rule, we would not be having these problems today. So let us remember how little we know. We have, I would like to see a world where a politician will say, I don't know, what can we do? Forget. I'd like to see panels and discussion groups on television, for example, question time, where people really listened to one another. Very often you can see while someone's talking that they're simply thinking of the next brilliant remark that they're about to make, which will ruin his or her argument. So we get stuck. We're stuck now in a kind of impasse where we all think we're right, where we all think that we know it all, where they are wrong and we are right. No, it's not like that. We are all in this together. We are implicated in one another. And we must learn the art of reverence, where we look at one another with the eyes of Ibn Arabi to see something. You needn't need to see it in a supernatural or religious way, but something absolutely sacred and beautiful in one another. And we create the kind of global society that Confucius had in mind, in which people not only live together with mutual respect, but in which every single member of that global society gives and receives a measure of absolute respect. And this is the task of our time. And I think it's wonderful that we've got this conference today. I'm so glad that there are so many young people here today, because you're going to have to sort out the awful mess that we have left you. And here's a wonderful opportunity for us all to sit down together and see how this can be done. Thank you.